Okay, welcome back. So this is video 4 in our 8 video series, and the video topic for video 4 is stage 2 of trauma healing, and we're talking about, so this is stage 2, part 2 presentation, and we're talking about your thinking, the way that trauma impacts the way that you think. So I'm going to share my screen. The negativity bias. So what is the negativity bias? Maybe you've heard of it. And how does stress, what does stress have to do with the negativity bias? So the negativity bias is a survival mechanism of the brain. And negative events actually will register more strongly in the nervous system than positive events over time. So the negativity bias stimulates the fight or flight response when it's activated. So we have this naturally, in fact, optimistic brain. And so when things happen and they don't go well, the negativity bias is actually a way to support our optimistic brain to get back to that optimistic place. But when we are living in a situation where the optimism is not available because maybe we can't change, remember we talked about in the first session, when we look at mental health, we have to dig deeper, right? So when we talk about these circumstances that we're unable to change, right? The negativity bias will take over and it'll start to register these negative events very strongly in your nervous system, sort of like, to try and help your body to return to that optimism. But what happens is we become habituated to danger, habituated to safety, right? Because our sympathetic nervous system is getting the cue that we live in a dangerous environment. And that negativity bias is then cueing the fight or flight response that we talked about. So our brains have this negativity bias, right? And we'll remember negative memories more than good ones. It helps us to protect ourselves, right? So fear, stress, and trauma govern and inform the negativity bias, right? By our nervous system. Interesting, right? So literally, right? It's like good things sort of slide off of us, right? And bad things stick to us. Velcro for the bad, Teflon for the good. And I'm sure that you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm teasing, right? So the negativity bias is good for survival in harsh conditions, right? It's lousy for quality of life, fulfilling relationships, personal growth, and long-term health. It makes us overlearn from bad experiences and underlearn from good ones. So this is important, right? When we're having these discussions about mental health, right? The brain doesn't care if you're happy. It just cares if you're alive. So if you run yourself too stressful, your brain will take over, keep you alive. It's survival oriented, right? So it's not necessarily happiness oriented. We have this optimistic brain, right? But if we aren't supported in that optimism, survival is king, right? So the consequences of the negativity bias, oh my goodness, so many consequences, right? And often unresolved trauma will inform the negativity bias. So that's why we want to treat that trauma, right? So the consequences, negative stuff gets more attention. We learn faster from pain than pleasure. We focus on avoiding loss rather than what we're gaining. And then negative interactions become more positive, more powerful than positive ones. And eventually what happens is these negative experiences sift into our implicit memory. So there's 2 types of memory, right? And here's the example. The implicit memory is the stuff that we don't know about, and the explicit memory is the stuff that we are aware of. So the explicit things we actively recall, and implicit is usually, things that are stored in your memory without that ability to actively recall. So where does that live? It lives in your nervous system. The memory lives in the nervous system. They don't actually know where exactly your memories lie in your brain when they try to map them. So I love this poem, right? I cannot stop your spiral, but I can wrap my arms around you until it begins to make sense. I cannot drown out the voice in your head, but I can whisper it's okay until they fade. I'm not afraid of your darkness. I do not despise your mess. I fear your inability to see what I see, a beautiful soul. So I just want to check in and remind you, we're talking about this metaphor, about the tree and our nervous system, that the nervous system is the root of the experience, and we start to heal the nervous system and it starts to heal the branches on the tree. Another look at that autonomic nervous system, right? So many feelings. And this, as I said, is where that implicit memory is stored. And that's why we say, that the body remembers, and often the triggers lie in your body. And when you're doing that deeper trauma work, it can be about coming into touch with your body because of the numbing and the dissociation that we've talked about. So remember, your nervous system talks to all of your organs through those two electrical pathways, right? That sympathetic and that parasympathetic. So the negativity bias actually activates this reactive brain, right? So this quote, I was forced to play a game that I had no chance of winning. So when your negativity bias has a hold of you, you're in the reactive brain, it cuts off communication to your frontal lobes. So you're literally, your cerebellum and your midbrain are communicating. So it's emotion driven, survival driven, fight or flight driven, right? Your frontal lobes aren't really engaging. Your prefrontal cortex isn't really involved. And that's what you need for that reflective brain to be on board. That's where your conscious control centers are. That's where your reasoning, problem solving, communication skills lie. But what happens is when you get stirred up with the negativity bias or triggered, right? The brain goes, uh-oh, survival mode. We don't need that reflective thinking. We need to be reactive, right? So here is what reactive thinking is doing, right? It's stopping messaging from reaching those frontal lobes. So it creates a feedback loop from your instinctive brain, which is your cerebellum, to your emotional brain, which is your limbic system. And that feedback loop, right, goes around and around and around. And then you're in that reactive thinking place. Survival based, right? Safety needs are huge. Trauma brain. So consider the idea, right, of being habitually dysregulated in your own life and how that might, in fact, be informing the way that you're thinking, right? If you're dysregulated, maybe 70% of the time, might it not make sense that your thoughts that 70% of the time are mirroring that dysregulation? So there is literally a stoplight to the reflective brain, and your negativity bias activates the sympathetic nervous system, right, via implicit memory. And that puts your brain into survival mode. And the midbrain, right, has a stoplight basically that prevents the signals from going through when your brain is in survival mode, your hypothalamus, it's called. Anyway, I've done the research around this, and there's research that shows, right, this is what happens. We flip our lid is another way that people will talk about it, right? Our frontal cortex goes offline. So when we're sympathetic aroused, right, we have dysregulated thinking, survival thinking. Negative thoughts and beliefs dominate in that. Our sympathetic nervous system is on and our parasympathetic nervous system is off. So when our parasympathetic nervous system is aroused, right, when our parasympathetic nervous system is engaged, we actually can do more regulated thinking. We're doing more thriving thinking. We're having more of a positive outlook. So that's when the parasympathetic is on, the sympathetic is off, right? They aren't on at the same time. They do a delicate dance, as I was saying. So when we consider change, right, we want to talk about regulated thinking. We talk about reframing some of those limiting beliefs, and we talk about shifting your thinking fast, right? Because when you're in that negativity bias, the belief system is very limiting. So the strategies are, you can't believe everything you think when you're in a dysregulated mindset, because often you're going to be more negative. Right? So we recommend a thought stopping, and that's where you recognize that when I think this thought, I stop it and insert another thought immediately. We challenge negative beliefs. We encourage people, just be curious when you start having some negative beliefs, right? Breath work can, believe it or not, interrupt those negative beliefs. Slowing down, right? Slowing down breathing, slowing down your thoughts. Engaging your parasympathetic nervous system, of course, right? And recognizing your dysregulated thinking. Maybe you're still acting on it, but at least you're recognizing that it's there. And affirmations are one that you can do where you recognize a negative thought and then you just flip it around and use that as a replacement thought. So turnarounds, right? Would be, oh, I'm so bad at blah, blah, blah. And then you would say to yourself, oh, I'm actually good at blah, blah, blah. So this is a helpful chart for recognizing dysregulated thinking styles, right? These are unhelpful thinking styles. There's the all or nothing thinking, right? Sometimes called black and white thinking. There's overgeneralization. There's when you disqualify the positive, right? You don't even notice it, sort of like the mental filter one, where you only pay attention to certain types of evidence. Other things are not on the menu. Jumping to conclusions, right? Making false assumptions, catastrophizing or minimizing. Personalizing, oh, it's all my fault. That can be another unhelpful thinking style. Or labeling things or people, someone's stupid or whatever. So those are some helpful tools in the sense that you can start to recognize those unhelpful thinking styles. And that's what you get a lot of times when your reactive brain is in charge. So with habitual dysregulation, we mistake our dysregulated thinking for reality because we're just there all the time. And this is especially present in depression, anxiety, PTSD, and other mental health concerns, which, as I've spoken to you about, are rooted in various types of trauma. So which one of these dysregulated thinking styles do you recognize in yourself? You could take a moment, maybe you recognize them all and you want to journal a little bit, but this would be, again, a time where you can take a pause and hit the journal or the workbook. So this is another helpful chart, right? So it's emotional distress, right? Irrational beliefs. So we want, with this chart, what we can do is we look at the emotion and then we work backwards to the irrational belief, right? Because this idea of challenging your thoughts, it can be hard work, right? It can be hard work. So when we look at, say, anxiety, right? Anxiety often has an irrational belief associated with it that I must be loved and approved of by everyone. Kind of unreasonable. So anxiety down here says if there's a chance that something bad might happen, I should dwell on it now. You don't know me. So I like that chart, and I hope that you'll use it and just sort of work backwards from it and look at those beliefs, right? Is that something that you're working on or that you need to be working on, right? Anger for me, right? It's awful when things don't go the way I would like. Yeah, it makes me mad, right? But is it awful when things don't go the way that we like? Like, does that the belief that it is that everything has to go my way? So those are the deeper processes in stage 2 that we're doing, right? We're challenging those thoughts. But when you're in stage 1 and you're just really dysregulated and someone's challenging your thoughts, you just get angry, right? Remember chandeliering? Okay. So do you recognize these dysregulated beliefs or irrational beliefs in yourself? You could take a moment again to journal if you wanted to, or hit the workbook if you wanted to record some of your thoughts around this. So these are fast ways to shift your thinking, right? So you want to dispute these irrational beliefs. You can't just be like, yeah, right? If you're serious, you have to challenge yourself, right? So disputing irrational beliefs, here are some suggestions, right? You say to yourself, where's holding this belief getting me, right? Is it helpful or is it self-defeating? Where's the evidence to support my belief, right? Is it consistent with reality? Is my belief logical? Does it follow from a preference or is it follow from logic? Is it really awful, right? Is it? Challenge that. Is it as bad as it could be? And can I really not stand it? So you want to challenge your thinking. You want to dispute these irrational beliefs. And you can ask yourself some questions in order to help the process, right? And then you can start, as you get good at it, to look for your more faulty thinking, for your trauma thinking, and see it as a sign to regulate your nervous system, right? So mantras can be good. Some people like to pair the mantras with mudras, right? Hand finger movements, which can be containment strategies as well. Meditation, always, people like the meditation, right? Exercise. Exercise can be a fast way to shift your thinking if you're an exerciser. And then mindfulness too, right? Remember, mindfulness brings us into the now, into the present. And there's lots of cool little tips that the mindfulness people use. And self-compassion, right, is a good way to shift your thinking. You want to get that self-compassion gesture first, and then the gesture cues your brain to start thinking in a different way. And we're going to talk a bit about the language and developing self-compassion language in just a few minutes. So what do you tell yourself when I'm feeling discouraged, right? This is how you want to shift your thinking, right? You want to tell yourself something different. This is tough, but so am I, right? I haven't figured this out yet. This challenge is here to teach me something, right? These are different ways to look at yourself when you're feeling discouraged, right? So now we're going to dive into the self-compassion practice exercise. This exercise is to help you find the language to support yourself in times of distress. We're putting together that self-compassion practice, remember. So we started with the gesture from stage 1, and now in stage 2, we're talking about developing the language to go with the gesture so that you can have a self-compassion practice that really lands and deeply resonates for you. So the first step of change, right, is to become aware of your own limiting beliefs. So in session 2, right, we're talking about these negativity bias, the irrational beliefs, the cognitive distortions. In stage 2, rather, session 2, part 1 and part 2, just to be clear. Reactive and reflective thinking, right? We're encouraging you, don't believe everything you think. Use your self-compassion language, all right? You want to use your self-compassion language. So we're going to develop that self-compassion language in an exercise right now. I'll stop the screen. So I'm just going to take a break and we're going to do this exercise. So what I want you to do is to think about a friend who's got a problem. And we're going to say a problem on a scale. This is a problem that isn't current, right? And maybe it's a problem on a scale of 1 to 10. 1's like minor, 10's like whoa, 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 right? And maybe it's like a 3 or a 4, okay? So we're going to conjure up a problem that a friend is having, right? It's a problem. We're thinking of them. Here they are in front of us. And what are we going to say to them? What are you going to say to your friend? Okay. Maybe you want to write that down. Maybe you want to press pause and just take a moment to journal. What would you say to a friend who was in a 4 out of 10 having a problem? Okay. So now we're going to shift. And what I want you to do is think about yourself and you're having a struggle, frustration with something, scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 4 or 5. It's not happening now, something from the past. Okay. And then what I want you to do again is to think about this time, what would you say to yourself? right? You don't know me. What would you say to yourself? Okay, be honest. Be honest. Write it down. What would you say to yourself? Oh my God, it's embarrassing what I would say to myself, right? I would say like get it together, like stop being so silly. Um, you're too tired, right? I would say all kinds of awful things. I wouldn't say the same thing I said to my friend. Okay, so that was just a quick little exercise, right? And now I'm hoping that you're recognizing, oh, I actually am really quite nice to my friend, but not to me. So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the language that you used for your friend, right? And try to develop some more of those encouraging phrases that you might say to your friend and write those down in your journal or your workbook, okay? Because what we're going to do when we move into stage 3 is we're going to put all these together into your self-compassion practice, right? So it's really important that you do take the time to actually write down for this exercise what you would say to a friend as opposed to what you would say to yourself. Because when you write what you can say to yourself, we can take it and swatch it, flip it, right? We can make it positive if you have it written. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again and we're going to button up this presentation with a friendly reminder about, not losing your past to your present. Remember, trauma takes you out of the present moment. It takes you out of your body, literally sometimes, right? If you've been, if you're one of those people who dissociates from their body when they're in their trauma response. So we don't want to lose our present to the past. We don't want to be in the future imagining what's going to happen either. We want to be coming into the present moment, right? So dysregulation, and how does this affect therapy? When you're dysregulated, it's more difficult to engage in those deeper therapy processes, which can be important when you're paying for therapy yourself, right? So if you can soothe your nervous system and get grounded and learn those sort of techniques yourself, you can actually go in and do the deeper work of therapy, which is looking at those limiting beliefs and where they come from and how they're holding them back, how they're holding you back and shifting them, right? So just remember that. Go easy on yourself, okay? So you absolutely have the right to use your therapist as a tool or a tool. I like that. Makes me laugh, right? The therapist tool. But we want to be used in a way that's effective, right? So we can absolutely do 5 or 6 sessions, 1 or 2 sessions, right? We can have a long-term relationship when we have a clear idea of what your goals are, okay? And we don't want you to be in therapy for years on end. Please don't do that to yourself, right? You can have a therapist that you like for life, for sure, but you don't need to be in the deeper process of therapy forever, right? You need to be working on your grounding skills, expanding that foundation, right? For stage 1. And then stage 2 is where you do that deeper work. And then stage 3 is where you integrate, right? So you don't live in stage 2 where you're constantly just looking at like all the things that are wrong with you and what you need to change, okay? But you also don't just live in stage 1 where you're just constantly regulate without looking at how this trauma has impacted your life, right? And you also want to be able to live your authentic self and be seen and valued for who you are. Your nervous system is damaged. So healing your nervous system, right, because it's a social engagement nervous system, means that you are looking for love and attachment, right? So we're going to talk about those relational things more in stage 3 presentations 1 and 2, part 1 and 2. Just get so excited. So in dysregulated nervous system, right, it impacts our ability to self-reflect. And that's a huge part of therapy. Self-reflection is huge. So limiting beliefs, they kick in when we're dysregulated. So you want to watch out for them. And remember, I showed you all those different beliefs or styles of thinking, and you can look at that piece of paper. It's support material in the course as well. You absolutely have it. You don't need to take a picture of it, but you can. So again, what I want to stress, same thing I stressed at the last presentation end, right? This dysregulation affects you physically in your body, emotionally, right? Your feelings, and also cognitively, your thoughts, right? You get in that feedback, emotional, instinctive feedback loop. You're not using your prefrontal cortex, right? And so dysregulation in your nervous system, right? It leads to physical and mental health problems. The two of them, not just one or the other. So again, right? Sending love to everyone who's trying to heal their best or trying their best to heal from things that they don't discuss, right? Thank you for being here for stage 2, healing of your nervous system. And I look forward to sharing stage 3 information with you in the next video. All right, you guys, I'll see you there.